Well, before I dive into anything, I'm super thankful to be able to speak to y'all. I definitely don't take opportunities like this for granted, and I've had a great time here in my 4 years, and it's dawned on me this will probably be the last time I get to do this, so I'm just really thankful for y'all and the ability to do this. With that in mind, tonight's lesson, I just want to talk about service. We have our Serve Week coming up, obviously, next week, and I wanted to examine two kind of questions related to service, and that is, what does Jesus say about serving, and how does Jesus serve? So, before we dive into those, I have a question for y'all, and that's, why do we serve? And is it because we have to? Is it to feel better? Is it because we feel obligated? Is that a guilt? I think Jason put that one there. I didn't know. But maybe you need 6 service hours for View 8405, one of my business majors. But I just, as we go through this lesson, I just want y'all to kind of reflect upon some of these questions as we look at what Jesus says and how does Jesus serve. If y'all just want to reflect on these kind of questions, we'll come back to them. So our first question, what does Jesus say about serving? And going in our first passage. Sorry, we didn't work on the time. That's probably my fault. I didn't have a good transition there. But yeah, first passage is Mark. Or I guess before we start, a lot of this will be in Mark, and there's a little bit of John, so if you want to follow along. But starting in Mark 9, 33 through 37, I'll try to read through this quick. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." So real quick, just a little context for this verse. This is shortly after the transfiguration of Jesus. So the apostles should know at this point that Jesus is going to die soon, or at least they've been told so. And I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more on the next slide, but that's why they're arguing about who was the greatest. I think they're preparing to succeed Jesus. They're preparing for what a life after Jesus might look like. And then as far as we keep going down, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. And the key part I want you to think about here is servant of all. Like, what does Jesus mean by that? And I think he's going to elaborate on that a little bit in the next section when he talks about the little children. So, I guess I just want to imagine, children even in our time can be hard to deal with, hard to work with. But to think of how much you have to humble yourself to serve a child, to see a child on the street and be like, how can I serve you today? What can I do for you? And especially in this time, children were basically second-class citizens. Nobody really looked out for children. And so I think Jesus is building upon the point that we are called to be servants of all. And that includes, little children. You may never think, oh, I'm called to serve a little child today. It's easy to think about, I'm going to serve the authority figures, serve the elderly, people you expect to serve. But Jesus is saying, you don't pick and choose who you want to serve. We are called to serve everybody. And so moving on to the next slide. I love history, so I couldn't resist putting this in there. But this is just a little context for how the apostles are thinking before the death of Jesus. They are thinking still that Jesus has come to establish this huge political kingdom, that he's going to conquer the Romans, overthrow Rome. And so they want to be the greatest because I think it's because their hearts are on the right place. They're thinking, I want to carve up a big piece of his kingdom after. And this kind of alludes to Alexander the Great. When he died, all of his generals took over, big swaths of his kingdom. And so if the apostles can get close to Jesus and they can get anointed by him, and designated the special place by Jesus, they're going to inherit a large part of his kingdom that he's come to establish on earth. But what they have wrong is Jesus did not come to establish a kingdom like this. And we'll keep kind of talking about that. But yeah, Jesus' kingdom obviously is, the kingdom to come. The kingdom, we're working for a kingdom that's not quite here yet, and it'll come when he returns after his crucifixion. So going to the next passage, so we're in Mark 10 now. So this one's a little longer one. I'll try to go through this quick. But James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you, he asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you were asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? I'm just saying on this side. We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. So when the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So going back real quick to the first part, this is one chapter, obviously, after what he says in Mark 9, and they're on their way to Jerusalem. This is right before Jesus is going to be crucified, and I think this is prime time for Jesus. He doesn't have a lot of time left with them, and so he's still trying to hammer in the same point that to be great is to be a servant. And I think, specifically what I highlight, you don't know what you were asking. I think that's because what these apostles are asking for is a lifetime of service. They want to be seated at the right and left of Jesus, and Jesus has already established what it means to be great in Jesus' eyes, in his kingdom, is to serve. And I think that's why Jesus said you don't know what you were asking, because what they're truly asking for, to be seated at his right and left, is a lifetime of service, a lifetime of humbling yourself, a lifetime of serving others, no matter who it is. And as we go down, he says, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. And I think in a way, he's alluding to the fact that we have to earn those places in Jesus' kingdom. We earn those by serving other people, because that's the definition of greatness for Jesus. Just saying, I'll leave with y'all. I really want y'all, if you take anything away from this, I'm going to say it probably 4 times, but service is the currency of Jesus' kingdom. That is how you become great in his kingdom, is by service. And he's trying to tell the apostles this in these passages. So if you go to the next slide, or no, go back, sorry. So yeah, once again, he's telling them, and I have to imagine at this point, Jesus is getting frustrated with the apostles. I don't think y'all should ever feel or get hard on yourself or feel bad for not listening to Jesus or not following commands, because the apostles were told twice to their face, what Jesus expects from them, what it takes to be great. And they still, I think, don't truly understand until the crucifixion, which we'll touch on near the end. But yeah, so it is, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve. So once again, he's touching on the point, slave of all. We don't choose who we want to serve. We are called to serve everybody. Some people it may be easy to serve. Some people it may be hard to serve, but this is what Jesus expects from us. He wants us just to serve. And yeah, as you can go to the next one. So basically from these 2 passages, the things that kind of what I hope that stick out to y'all, we are called to serve everybody. We don't pick and choose, as I said. Jesus expects service everywhere and for everybody. And he, when we talk about some of the ways he served, you'll see that as he serves. And service is the currency of Christ's kingdom. And I want y'all to keep these 2 in mind. As we go through how does Jesus serve, I think you'll see that he acts both of these commandments out. So he's not just telling you to do it, and he doesn't fulfill what he says. He does everything that he says. And you'll see it kind of add up to the crucifixion. Moving forward. So we'll look at now, how does Jesus serve? And first one, it's a long passage. I guess I'll read this one. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, My BUA 460 professor told me that people understand things better when you move at this speed. Anyways, shout out Dr. Skipper. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine. Woman, why do you involve?" "My hour is not yet come," his mother said to the servants. "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." They filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from. The servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheap wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." And so just the context for this, in the Gospel of John, this is the first miracle that Jesus does. So prior to this, none of these people understood, what Jesus was capable of, what kind of miraculous acts he could do. And I think it's funny, it seems like Jesus is going to do nothing. His mother asks him, mother doesn't ask, she says they have no more wine. He says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" It seems like Jesus is just not going to do anything. And you'd probably think that if you were at this wedding. But I think there's 2 ways I want y'all to kind of look at this passage. In this time period, weddings were a huge deal. They're like these giant ceremonies. Everybody comes together. And I guess it's normal for them to drink a lot of wine at these ceremonies. And so there was no wine. There was no party, basically. And what Jesus is doing, I think, in providing the wine for this wedding, is he's showing that sometimes service can be fun, I think. Sometimes you're going to serve, and it's going to be like a party. Like next Friday night at the Holiday Inn. Not advertising. But I think he's saying service is not always meant to feel like a duty. It's not always meant to, feel like a drag, like you just got to push through it. Like this, I imagine this service was very fun for Jesus because, the party was dying. And, I wrote on my sheet, I'd like to quote it if I could find it. It said, "One might say the vibe was dead, And Jesus rallied for the day." Anyways, okay. So I just keep that in mind. Moving forward, I like to imagine. Wait, go back. Sorry. I'd like to imagine you are one of the servants in this story. I think this is one of the coolest miracles in the Bible because of looking at it from the servant's viewpoint. So Jesus has done no miracles to this point. Nobody knows really what he's capable of yet. And so just imagine you're the servant. Your master, or the master of the banquet who you're serving, has ran out of wine. He's probably embarrassed. He's probably humiliated. He's probably like, "Gosh, dude, I've let everybody down." And this random guy, Jesus, comes up to you and says, "Fill these 6 giant stone water jars with water." And he tells you then to go take them to this master to go try them. And this is probably like dirty water. Like they don't have purified water this time. So you're the servant. You're like, what is going on right now? And so you follow his orders. You take these 6 huge water jars to the master of the banquet. And I just have to imagine, the shock on their faces as the master of this banquet takes this water jar and drinks it, and it's wine. Because as the servants are the only ones that knew that, they just filled up these jars with random water somewhere. And they bring it to the master, and it is, the best wine. He says they saved the best till now. And I think this is just an awesome, illustration. Jesus just wants us to serve, just follow his orders kind of, and he can make great things out of it. He can turn it into something miraculous. And sometimes I think, to go off that, we're not going to understand how our service impacts people. Jesus can turn water to wine. All we have to do is just get the water, just serve, and just let Jesus do something great with it. And I think that's just an awesome thing about this story, or about this miracle, John. So moving forward now. So next one is washing the feet. So this is John 13:10-16. Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean. But not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean." When he finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And so, a little bit of context on this for this one. I try to cut it shorter because I'm already reading so much. So Peter tells him before this, he's like, Jesus, you can't wash my feet. And Jesus, I think he says, you don't understand now, but you will. And he kind of alludes to it again here. Do you understand what I've done for you? And that's because the washing of the feet is alluding to the forgiveness of sins. And so, yeah, I mean, Jesus, he very clearly tells them that to serve as he does. So we've already established to be great in his kingdom is to serve. And he very clearly tells them now here, now that I have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I think this is establishing that service is going to be humbling sometimes. Sometimes we're going to have to stoop maybe below our standard or what we're used to serve. I like to think of this as a CEO of a company going down to wash the janitor's feet. Just because of how great Jesus is, for him to wash anybody's feet is so humbling and so powerful, I think. And I think Jesus calls for the same from us, to serve people that maybe are not in the same social status as us, or maybe they're like children, they're younger than us, but we're still called to serve them, and we're still called to serve all the people, even if it's humbling. So I think the lesson here is sometimes service is going to be humbling. Sometimes it's going to require you to do things that maybe are below what you're used to, and maybe require you to be uncomfortable. And also, just to allude to Jesus' grace and how powerful it is, you got to think, Jesus even washes Judas's feet, who he knows is going to betray him, who he knows is going to turn him in, and he still washes his feet. I think Jesus does this because sometimes we're even called to serve people maybe we don't get along with. Maybe people have hurt us, maybe people have betrayed us. And that doesn't mean we don't serve them. That doesn't mean we just give up. Jesus shows that we can do this because he did it first. And that's kind of what I was saying. Jesus will constantly be fulfilling what he says about service, he is doing constantly throughout the Gospels. So moving forward to the last one. So the crucifixion, read this one real quick. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, the King of the Jews. They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "To you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe. Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. So obviously, coming off of Easter, I'm sure you all have heard this story before, but I mean, Jesus, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, I don't know how to say it. And Judas betrays him. We all kind of know the story, I think. But I just want y'all to imagine, keep going, I guess that train of thought. His most trusted apostle, Peter, denies him 3 times. Virtually all of the people in his inner circle in his time on earth have deserted him at this point. They've all left him. They've either revoked him, they've left him, they've ran away, they don't claim him anymore. So Jesus gets turned over, he's already lost. Everybody's inner circle has given up on him, or they've ran away. They're no longer claiming him. So he's already lost all of that, and yet he still is mocked by the Roman soldiers. They call him the King of the Jews. Those who pass by hurl insults at him. The priests and the teachers of law mock him. Even the people he's crucified with feel it necessary to heap more insults on him. So just to understand the amount of weight that is on Jesus' shoulder, what he is shouldering at this point when he's going to the cross. He has lost everything. He's gone through the deepest pit I think anybody could possibly go through. He's lost everything. Everybody's insulting him, everybody's turned on him, everybody hates him here. But Jesus still does not refrain from going to the cross. And this, I think, is the final ultimate act of service, because it gets very difficult on us here. He's going through pain, and we can't even imagine how painful this experience is. We try to, we have a lesson on it, we sit there in church, but if you really think about losing everybody you love, basically, and everybody's insulting you, people, your group, your enemies, people walking by, but Jesus still goes to the cross. One of my favorite verses is Matthew 26:39. My Father, be your will, take this cup from me, kind of, nonetheless, not my will, but your will be done. And the reason this is so powerful, I think, is because of how difficult it is. And I think that's alluding to sometimes service is going to be difficult, sometimes it's going to be hard. But how difficult it is, if Jesus were to forego this, if he does not get crucified, how can you believe anything he says about service? If he does not commit the ultimate act of service, if he does not humble himself and become a slave of all on the cross, take on all of our sins, if he does not fulfill what he has said about service, how can you believe it? How can you follow that? But because, even when it's excruciatingly painful, excruciatingly difficult, Jesus still goes to the cross to die for all of our sins, making himself, a servant of all, a slave of all, and showing, why Jesus is the greatest, in the kingdom, because he became the very least of us all, the servant of us all. He took on all of our sins. So, moving forward, just the general takeaways, I want you all to get from this lesson, hopefully. We're called to serve everybody, even children. So, as Jesus says this in Mark 9 and 10, and then he acts it out throughout the Gospels. He doesn't pick and choose who he serves, when it's convenient and whatnot, but he serves everybody. Probably my favorite line, I hope if y'all take anything away, please take this away. Service is the currency of Christ's kingdom. That is what Jesus values as great. Our culture may value personal achievement, salary, how much can you bench, how far can you hit a golf ball, etc., etc. But you can put anything you want there. But for Jesus, service is what makes you great in his eyes, in his kingdom. That's what really matters to him, is that you give your time, therefore your service, for him, and you serve all the people you come into contact with. And then looking at how does Jesus serve. Sometimes service is fun. Sometimes it's like turning water to wine. You have a big party and you're just amping up the party. Sometimes it's humbling. Sometimes you might be called to wash somebody's feet. Do something that stoops below your, I can't even get a way of phrasing that, but stoops below your level, I guess. And then sometimes service can be difficult, like Jesus going to the cross. He had to take on all that pain, all that suffering, all that sin, just for us. And then sometimes we will not understand how Jesus is using our service to impact people. And I think it's similar to the water, or same story, water and wine. Jesus took all the servants did was give water, and Jesus is the one who made it miraculous. And I think, we may do things for people, we may not understand, like, dang, that really made his day or her day. And I think with that story, Jesus is telling us, just serve, just serve. Let Jesus do the miraculous work in that. Let Jesus work within that service. All we're called to do is just, be his foot soldiers, I guess. Just serve people and let him turn into something truly miraculous and truly great. And then everything begins with service on the cross. As I said, if Jesus forgoes the cross, how can you trust anything he says? If he turns his back on his own commandments, if he says, no, I'm going to choose not to be a servant anymore. I'm going to choose not to serve anymore because it got hard. It got difficult. I had to take on, this pain. But no, Jesus, and we know he grappled with this because of, those prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's talking to the Lord, when you take this cup. We know that he grappled with this. But I think, that's part of, he still chose to go through with it to honor all that he commands us to do and show that it is possible. He did it for us first. So moving on, the one big takeaway from all that, there's no one-size-fits-all for serving besides the fact we are called to. And, Jesus shows it in Mark 9 and 10. Serve everybody. Serve all. Become a slave of all. He's calling us to serve. There's no one-size-fits-all. It can be fun, humbling, difficult. You may never know what's around the corner when you serve, but we are called to serve because that's what it takes to be great and Jesus' eyes and his kingdom. Now, I know just a question for y'all, something to think about. As you go forward, there are two types of people. Which one will you be? There's those that use God. There's those that let God use them. There's those that take, and those that serve. There's those that see someone and say, what can I gain from you? And there's those that see someone and say, how can I serve you? Thank you.